know.
Yeah, and I'd say, but can't really come back and tell the story about that if you do. What
do you mean can't come back and tell the story?
I mean, concept being is the next time you talk to God, literally, like in any in most sense.
Oh, you're talking about being able to talk to God after you die.
Yeah,
oh, actually die and ask the question.
Yeah, I'd be like, hey man, I got a question.
Right.
I got a few actually.
Right.
But yeah, no, like the concept being, I mean, it's hard to say anything indefinitely, especially whenever it comes to religion, because you're talking about essentially the most powerful thing that ever was and will be.
Right.
So you're talking about something that's literally beyond our comprehension. Like the fact that we're pretty young as a species at that same junction. The universe is infinite old. Actually, I think they can trace that back, can't they?
They've got
estimates, but even then, it's an obscenely crazy number.
Yeah.
It really is a very, very wacky number.
Right.
Like we're not going to be telling the story of, where was I going with that? Sorry, brain fart. Either way,
okay,
long story short, though, I think people are pretentious, and we think that we're going to have all the answers, and we're not.
No, it's very arrogant for us to believe we'll ever be able to understand everything.
No, and if we do, I'm not going to be around to tell the story about it.
Well, and then go ahead.
There is even you can go along 1,000 concepts of how things go afterwards, but we just don't know.
No,
we might be able to chill and sit on a couch and talk to God for a few hours and be like, hey, dude, I got some questions. You want to do some explaining? Because I am massively curious. Or we might just be like, hey, dude, show up at a gate, check us in. And
it might just be like the biblical interpretation of St. Paul or Peter is there at the fucking gate waiting for us to check us in.
There's also the other concept that life doesn't ever end. It goes, it recycles. Like, because you know how people say the story of, I see the light, there's the weird concept of, that's you coming out of the birth canal of your mom, and guess what? You don't really remember much before that, because I think I would remember if I could.
Well, if you could.
If I could remember, I think I would remember.
What if that moment is so traumatizing for you that you end up just not forgetting the whole thing?
Yeah, that's the part of the concept. That's genuinely part of the concept going into that, is that it is so traumatizing, dying, meaning that you forget everything before and you're starting fresh completely. It's a wipe. It's part of the design of life. Which, I mean, it's an interesting concept. It's a really interesting concept.
I mean, but trying to remember all past lives before this one, if that is the real concept, it might be too much for a human being, so it might be best that we do forget all of this, or all of our past lives, especially if we were had a past life that was
because that very concept, Hitler's alive at some point, another time in history. So do you think that person would be, I mean, it's the concept of second chances.
Well, it's reincarnation.
Is you get infinite second chances.
Yeah, it's a reincarnation.
There's this one video that I watched. It's called The Egg, which was it's pretty much another theory where when you die, you end up being reborn into another life, either in the future or in the past. But in the end, you have to live every single life in this universe to kind of be created as a new god, kind of what it was. And I was quite interested of what that theory was actually saying, because pretty much everybody in here is actually the same person. They just have no memory of the past life that they lived as each other. So pretty much I'll be talking to myself as talking to you guys.
So, fun story about that. There's that concept is actually put forth in there's a series of books called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh, and basically I believe there are prophets in the world, in like there was in biblical times, right? So what it comes down to is, also I kind of agree along the lines that other people have talked about, where they say that the prophets of the world, the reason why we have stories about those prophets is because there was many of them, and the reason why we have one big story about one individual is because there was many prophets at the time, and we took all of the ideas from those many prophets and their wisdom and put them into one person and told the story about one person, so we'd have an ideal man, right? That was the concept. At least that's the theory behind it. Obviously, there's no way to prove it without time travel. Yeah. But
also, I hate to say it, but like the Bible has been revised several times.
Right. So anyway, that's
written by people.
That's not the point of this.
Bible's pretty much a different form of history book.
Right. Neil Donald Walsh is a modern day, I guess, I don't even know how you describe him, spiritualist. Either way, he wrote these books, and that concept is in those books, is that God, because the whole concept behind the books is that Neil Donald Walsh, the precept behind the book was Neil Donald Walsh, it was right after Easter, he went and sat down on his typewriter, and he wrote out, like, why are we here, or something like that. It was this outrage scream against God, is basically what it was. And he had this voice pop inside of his head. And he goes, and the voice inside of his head goes, do you really want an answer, or are you just screaming? Or are you just venting? Something like that. Because it's been years since I actually read the books all the way through from beginning to end, because there's 3 of them. But it's, so basically the whole book, the whole precept behind this book is it's a literal conversation between him and God. He asks a question, God answers. And that's what it is for these 3 books. That's what it was. And this period of time went over for a long time. Anyway, so the concept inside of that was that God created, we are all aspects of God. We are all like sections of him. Think about God as like this giant, massive blob of energy and intelligence and being. It's everything that there is and ever was and ever will be, that kind of thing, right? It's like the primordial ooze, but there's an intelligence in there. There's an understanding inside of that primordial ooze. So what happens is God decided he wanted to experience the universe. He wanted to experience reality. So what God did was he took portions of himself and created man, and created, and put little pieces of his own energy inside of everything, right? So you and I are just different aspects, different variations of God. So our experiences, the things we go through, is their experiences for God. It's us in human form. It's kind of like the Christ concept, except not as like literal savior, perfect being thing. Mm-hmm. It's just more the idea that the soul inside of every human being, we experience things so that way God can experience them, because God is everything. So in order for God to experience other aspects of himself, he has to tear off sections of himself and put them inside of human form. And then after death, we go through, we die as individuals, we die and we go back essentially to God. And he never really got into specifics, but you kind of get, basically you go in and you get the option. You get to kind of go back in and you can go through and experience life again. If you choose to, or you can return to the collective and become another massive portion of God. At least that's kind of how I understood it. At least that was my interpretation of it. I could be completely wrong. I've never sat down with Neil Donald Walsh. But what's funny about that is it kind of lines up with science. Because with science tells you energy cannot be created or destroyed. It just changes form. So from a scientific aspect, reincarnation actually kind of makes sense, at least to me, from just strictly that aspect. Mm-hmm. The fact that energy can't be destroyed or created, it's got to change form, which means the energy that's inside of you, whether you want to look at that as your soul or your consciousness or whatever else, that's got to go somewhere when you die and deteriorate. Now, does it just change form? Well, what happens to your consciousness? Because that's the other thing. Consciousness is something we can't nail down. I can't point on the anatomy button and go, this is where your consciousness lives. You could say that your consciousness lives in your brain, and your brain's the processing unit for it, and that's fine, but it's still at the same time, it's just a processing unit.
Which brain?
One thing I kind of want to know is, where did the concept of heaven actually come from? Like, who believed that heaven actually exists? Or, because after you die, they say you go to heaven, but how would you know that if after you're dead, you really can't come back and say, hey, you go to heaven afterwards? So
you are asking the question that philosophers and biblical scholars and historians and everybody else have asked for years, and there's a lot of good theories behind it. There's a biblical documentary series that I'll have to show you sometime that delves into a lot of that, but that has to do with Jordan Peterson did a whole biblical scholarly thing on that. He did like the first 10 books of the Bible, and he was kind of going through the Bible. They're like 2 hours long, but you can watch them. But those are the kind of challenges he's going through. Those are the ones that, those are the ones he's dealing with. Those same questions are the ones that he kind of tries to go through and conceptualize all the time. And I mean, I could give you his opinion on it, but he's probably better at that than I am, if you're really curious about that kind of stuff. But his kind of thing is that his argument when it comes to the Bible is that the Bible is like what I was talking about earlier with the prophets, a culmination of wisdom put into stories that are the best way to live life, is kind of how he looks at it. It's the best way for society to function, for life to happen. Now, the concept of heaven and all of that kind of stuff, I mean, you can be the what's the word? Not narcissist. Pessimist. Yeah, you can be. That wasn't the word I was looking for, but that'll work. You can go through the pessimistic viewpoint, and that it was just a delusion as an excuse. Atheist standpoint. That's really what it is. That it was just a delusion as something to help us deal with grief.
I see.
I don't believe that, but I don't believe that personally. But that's one argument for it anyway. The other argument is that there's miracles that happen in the world, and people see things that they can't explain. Now, people want to argue that there's scientific, that's just, science just needs to explain it. Well, even in modern day, there's some miracles that science can't explain. There's a reason why the Catholic Church has to go through such a stringent vetting process before they verify before they'll claim something as a miracle, or before they'll make somebody a saint. I mean, they go through a lot of scientific verification, and they have some of the world's best scientists at the Catholic Church. Nobody wants to admit it, but Rome's got some bad motherfuckers over there. They've got some smart people. They're Harvard, Yale, Oxford educated priests over there that just decided they loved the Catholic Church enough to where they wanted to do their science with the church.
Well, and I mean, I hate to say, but we were talking about, I brought up that guy earlier, shot 28 times. That was the only time in his life he had ever prayed.
Right.
Up to that point, he prayed one time, and it was whenever he was shot. He just prayed that he would get home to his daughter and wife.
Yeah.
That was the only thing he wanted.
Yeah.
He fulfilled his mission afterwards. He cleared the building. He let his guys know. He was like, we still have people alive inside. Don't bomb this place.
All right.
He saved other lives. Like that. I mean, and now he's helping other people. I don't know if that's, and I can't claim that as a miracle. Obviously, I'm not the Catholic Church, and I'm not insanely religious either, so I'm not going to claim that. But that's pretty fucking crazy to say that's not at least something close to a fucking miracle.
Well, and that was one of the things I've always argued with atheists over, was they want to be like, there's like, oh, there's no God, there's no scientific proof for God. Well, that's somebody. My buddy Bob, he's an atheist, and I've met a lot of other atheists in my life and stuff like that, and it's such a depressing concept to me. Like, why would you want to run around your life and think that there's no point, there's nothing afterwards, we're not going for any goal? Now, there's logical people. I got a buddy of mine, Sid, who, I mean, he's very much he's an atheist Jew. He's one of those Jews that just believes the Jewish heritage is a bloodline. He doesn't really look at it as a religion. And that's as far as he's concerned, after you're dead, and that's it. And that's a depressing concept. And I've had things in my life that I would qualify as miracles, because I've had things happen where I prayed really hard and it worked out.
Yeah. Well, and pause before we go too far away from the concept of atheism. Like, I just think it's a little bit pretentious to say that indefinitely that there is no God. It seems like you're not leaving the window open enough. You're just saying no, there's no God, and it's like, okay, what if there is though? You're asking the wrong questions. You're not being realistic. Like, to say there is no God almost indefinitely just seems pretentious to me.
Well, I think it's arrogant.
Yeah, arrogant.
I think it's very arrogant.
Arrogant's the word I'm thinking.
I think it's arrogant to assume that you
know.
Yeah, that you can flat out with 100%. Now, I'm okay with anybody that goes, I don't know. Well, I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. You know what I mean? If you're willing to go, well, I haven't seen anything that causes me to reason to believe in God. If you want to be that kind of atheist, I'm totally okay with that.
I get it.
Yeah, I totally get that.
That's
I'm
relatable.
yeah, that's completely relatable. I can totally understand only ever, going, well, I don't know. I'm okay with going, I don't know. That makes sense. But to be able to go beyond a shadow of a doubt and say, no, there is no God. Well, you don't know that. You haven't been to every corner of the universe. You haven't even been beyond the edge of the universe. You don't know what's beyond that edge of the universe.
You don't even know what's beyond probably wherever you live.
Well, yeah, and that's the other thing. You really don't know what's even beyond your planet.
Well, no, most people haven't been beyond their country, and I'm sorry. If you're going to say that there isn't a God, go talk to more people.
Right.
Because if you talk to enough people who have lived in terrible, terrible, terrible situations, usually they believe in God.
Oh.
They won't. I mean, in my opinion, I will believe that most people that say, I don't know, but I believe there may be a God.
Right.
That's the smartest viewpoint, in my opinion.
Right.
If you're gonna live your life in that way, I get it, because that makes sense. Okay, yeah. There may be a God. Yeah. Okay. That's casual optimism.
Right.
And I hate to say it, but covering your bases.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I won't ever argue with somebody who's covering their bases and like, I don't know which God's which.
Right.
Like it might just be a conglomeration of all of them, all that, but there's no real way of knowing.
No, there's really not, and that's why I studied like paganism and Wicca when I was in like 5th and 6th grade. I studied all of that stuff pretty heavily, and there's this really cool concept that they've got. At least in one of the first books I read by Silver Ravenwolf, it was How to Ride a Broomstick or something like that. I don't remember what it was. But I mean, it was a witch book, man. I mean, it was witchcraft and stuff like that. But
that kind of right.
Yeah, that kind of broomstick. Yeah, that's why it was How to Ride a Broomstick. It was a joke. Obviously.
No, joke.
Yeah, no, there was obviously it was a joke. They weren't going to literally teach you how to ride a broomstick. Really, Carlos?
Sorry,
right.
I couldn't help myself.
But anyway, there was this concept she had in there that was really good. It was talking about they looked at God as a many-faceted stone, which is why they were so okay with like druids and stuff like that, is because they looked at, their opinion was, as long as it was a positive religion, all we were doing was God is a many-faceted stone. And all it was Christians were looking at him from this side, where pagans were looking at him from this side, and the Jews were looking at him from this side, and the Buddhists were looking at him from this side, and so on and so forth. As long as the center, as long as this part was a positive religion, as long as that's what everybody was looking at, their opinion was that we're all looking at the same thing, we're just looking at it from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I really liked that concept, because I kind of fall on that side. I believe in God. I know there's something out there. Currently, I'm reading the Bible, but it's one of those things. I am willing to accept that there are other paths to the happy the happy place after you die, the promised land or the heaven or whatever else you want to call it, because I don't believe in a God that is so cruel that he would send the Buddha, the one that all the stories are based on. I don't believe he'd send Buddha to hell just because he didn't believe in Christ.
Actually, Buddha was a bit of an asshole, but that's a whole different thing.
Yeah, okay, if you want to talk about the actual man, I'm talking about the concept.
I'm joking.
Like we're talking about Abraham. Abraham was a flawed man. Noah was a fucking drunk. According to biblical stories and stuff like that. But it's just one of those things. As long as I'm of the opinion, as long as it's a positive religion and you're seeking to do good in the world and improve yourself among all other things, I think that's the most important part.
If there is a God and he sends a decent human being to hell just because he didn't believe in him, exactly, or
that's not a God worth worshiping.
Yeah, instead he decided, God's not the biggest part of my life. The person next to me, I'm going to make sure they're happy, and all these people, I do nothing but good in my life. They send him to hell because he didn't agree with him. I won't. I'll cast that God off. I'll go to hell. That's fine.
See, and it's really funny because I started out reading the New Testament, and I think I'm in Acts. I think I might have moved beyond Acts now. I think I'm in Romans now, but I was in Acts, and there's this really good point in Acts that they talk about. The apostles are coming to, I think Paul, whoever they'd left in, whoever ended up being in charge after Jesus left, and they went to him, and what it was is the Gentiles.
Actually, who was? Someone took over, right? Yeah.
Kinda.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all
that's where a lot of split of the religions come from, as to who was actually in charge afterwards, because of the Catholic Church and stuff like that.
Another thing that might... Oh, but going back to the whole concept of, like, heaven, hell, and stuff like that, I was thinking of, since we were talking about reincarnation and then also, like, the concept of going to heaven and hell, what if that was actually a reincarnation state? That you get reincarnated as a species that's kind of resemblance of an angel or a demon.
Yeah, I mean,
it could be based on it's a perfectly valid opinion.
It could be throwing you back in time, forward in time. Like I said, it's one of those questions. Like all of us have been saying, it's one of those questions we just don't have answers for, and it's the fact of the matter is a lot of people rack their brains with it, but we won't know.
No,
we won't know until we get there, and even then, I hate to say it, but the good possibility is we won't know even then.
Yeah, that's it's a very good possibility.
Because we are simple-minded creatures, and there's also the other theory: we are animals. So we might not have an afterlife.
Well, I mean, there's no theory about us being animals. We are animals.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, the concept being is, we might just have one go of this, and best thing to do is try to do as much good as possible. So the next set of, I've never seen a problem personally with being okay with that. I'm okay with whatever comes.
Yeah.
Because,
it's not like there's much you can do about it.
Exactly. It's not like I can... Yeah, it's not like I can stop death from coming, but I can at least do as much good as I can while I'm here.
Yeah, and I think that's the way. I think that's the way everybody should look at it. As far as if nothing else, try to do as much good in the world as possible. You know what I mean? Try to make it to where, if nothing else, you leave a good mark on the world. You do good things and all of that kind of stuff. You don't. It's not something you have to worry about.
Yeah. If you can leave the world with good conscience, feeling like you did some good stuff, that's enough personally.
Absolutely.
But, obviously there's some people who, they fight against it and they don't, and I hate to say it, but there's no denying that we will all reach an end, inevitably.
The only two things in life are guaranteed: there's death and taxes.
Yep.
So, and even then, taxes we might actually be able to do something about.
To a certain extent, sure.
Yeah. So,
all right. Been doing stuff.